The challenges that I've lived through, whether that was 9/11 or the tsunami, earthquake, nuclear disaster in Japan, I'm kind of known as being a disaster person, which is strange, but I see those as resilience advertunities, which is another word to talk about. The advertunity is where you have an adversity that meets an opportunity, and it's inside that if you change the way you're thinking, you're going to be more resilient.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Finding Equilibrium show. I'm delighted to be here, delighted you're here, and delighted that my guest today is Nathan Andres. I think I pronounced that correctly. So Nathan is the people director for the Asia Pacific region at The Body Shop, but is also a very established coach and speaker, and of course soon to be a published author. So that sounds super excited, and I'm really keen to talk to you about that and about The Body Shop. But first of all, Nathan, thank you so much for spending some time. How are you today?
Lawrence, it's great to see you again. I'm doing really well. And I have to say thank you to all of Australia for putting me up in very good conditions while I was coping with COVID down under with the koalas and the kangaroos, but feeling really good today.
Good. So you're on the mend. And for people who don't realize, you just literally returned to Singapore from Melbourne, and you caught COVID while you were here. So that's not a great welcome, is it? Welcome to Australia.
I was really well taken care of, and I was actually it was a really good experience, and I was able to recover fully and return. But if I had to do it again, I would say I would gladly get sick again in Australia. Yeah.
That's good to hear. So let's start by stepping right back. So clearly you've achieved a lot in your life, being the people director for the Asia Pacific region of The Body Shop and all the other things, and a book that is about to come out. But tell us a little bit of your background. How did you become the people director for Body Shop? How did you achieve what you've achieved? Clearly you are not a local to Singapore, so I'd love to understand a little bit about your story, your journey.
I like to tell people I'm kind of an accidental business person, definitely an accidental HR person. It started many years ago. It's hard to tell the Asia Pacific journey without kind of telling how the first part happened. But my first job out of university was in Japan, and I lived and worked in Japan for 5 years before I stumbled into HR. And over the HR years, I worked in professional sports. I worked in high fashion. I worked in fast fashion. It was with fast fashion that I actually returned to Asia Pacific and to Japan specifically. And that's where things kind of became the accidental HR Asia Pacific expert, I suppose. We opened a very big retail business, a very popular business, popular brand in the early, 2010s in Japan, and that expanded my scope quite quickly. As we were expanding the brand, we opened businesses in Hong Kong, China, Singapore, Australia, and on it kind of went. And ultimately, I started to become known as an HR guy who was able to expand businesses that wanted to emerging brands, particularly in the retail space in Asia Pacific and Japan and China, and greater Asia Pacific. And also I was kind of known for being a culture vulture, someone who really cared about people, but also could really then plant the flag of various corporate cultures in different markets with different cultures, different languages, different practices. And ultimately, I as I moved back to Tokyo the second time with one brand, that ultimately brought me to Hong Kong, where I lived for 8 years, continued working in retail businesses. I took a time out for a little bit to be a toy maker, worked for probably the largest toy manufacturer that you never heard of, who manufactures the toys for that very popular QVC restaurant chain that puts toys in boxes. That was very exciting. And ultimately got the calling to come back to retail. You know, there's a dynamic that happens in retail with speed and connection with customers and people that I couldn't get enough of that. And so I returned. I loved toy making. I loved the people I was with. I loved my boss and team there. But ultimately, I returned to retail, and ultimately, that's how I ended up at the Body Shop. I came to Singapore. The role is based here, working for the Body Shop, quite specifically because they were looking to do some expansion to take over their Japanese business, but also to expand in China. And they are on a rejuvenation journey specific to making our culture come alive in what we call purpose-driven leadership. And as a coach, a big part of my coaching practice is around purpose and helping people unlock their own authenticity and to build their resilience skills. That's my purpose. So to come and be part of a company that wants to help unlock other people's purposes and to drive culture and to drive business expansion, it was a bit of a no-brainer for me. You know, when the stars line up and your purpose becomes something that you can achieve and look towards, it became very clear that this is where I needed to come next. And so here I am in Singapore. Came in COVID, right before COVID, and I've seen most of Singapore from my apartment view, which is really exciting. And now that we're opening up and traveling again, I'll be able to get around Singapore in a different way. But it's been really, really an amazing experience to see. I've been a business traveler here for many years, but I living here and being based in this part of the world on the equator has also been a really joyful experience for me in many ways, because it's accessible to Australia, New Zealand. It's accessible to the rest of Southeast Asia, and certainly very accessible and critical as a city for the rest of Asia and North Asia. So I've enjoyed it, and that's kind of how I got here. I always thought I was going to be a scholar, an academic, and write books. And somehow I ended up in HR, you know, expanding businesses and being culture guru. But I spend most of my days now in the well-being space, which is a big passion of mine. I think partly as a coach, but to really drive change for companies as they look at their culture to integrate well-being specific to all dimensions. But I look at that with diversity, inclusion. I look at that as a feminist. I have strong feminist views to ensure that we're looking at equity, and also to ensure that, you know, we're looking at all of the pieces that go into someone's well-being, and ensuring that becomes part of the culture that we build. And that's a big part of the work that I do today.
No, I love that. Thank you very much for sharing that with me. I mean, so I just want to pick on something that you said, and it's about, I think you said unlocking the authenticity and resilience, so teaching people these skills. And it's interesting to think that we can learn these skills, and it's like never before has there been such a critical time to be able to unlock those skills in yourself and in your team and in your organization. Do you have a framework in terms of how you actually look at that and you help people to develop those skills? I'd love to understand your approach to actually doing that.
Thank you for that question, Lawrence. I think you almost set up my book perfectly there. That's what my book is about. Yeah, my book is really about building what I call authentic resilience, which is kind of a magical power for anyone who wants to live a life of well-being and make their life count, as I say. The formula for that really in my practice and in some of the tools that I have built works alongside a lot of psychology, neurophysiology, and is built on the foundations of some of the greats in psychology, sociology, and neurophysiology and biology. In short, I've come up with a formula that helps people find their authentic selves, but also to build the resilience. And it's based on an acronym that is what I call REAL, REAL. It's the REAL model, and the book is called Your Real Life, which is a way for people to really tap into understanding where the resilience comes from, where it lives in our bodies, but also how to create an authentic life that is built on purpose, core values, strengths, and the tools of self-care. And throughout, when we look at the R, which is really reality, and I've built a reality curve, when we look at the reality curve and how people, move through that curve, we say, well, you're really resilient. People don't often understand why. But when you look at the reality curve and you say, well, actually resilience comes from taking back those hard parts and leaning into that curve as you embrace, acknowledging and accepting an adversity and then planning into how to move and open your mind and reframe things to take that control back. And it's then in the E of the acronym of energy that we really then breathe life into making that plan of taking control back and building resilience and learning and growing from that. Putting the energy behind that is critical. The A is really about authenticity, which I mentioned comes from building purpose and looking at your core values, your core strengths, your beliefs about yourself, combating some of the negativity bias that we have as humans. And at the same time, understanding that inside negativity bias is where imposter syndrome and sometimes toxic positivity comes from, and where our inner critic can really, be squawking very, very loudly, and learning to, silence that inner critic, because when we do that, we can lower self-doubt and build self-esteem and self-confidence. And ultimately, we end with the L, which is all about love. And, I sound a little bit flower power, hippie kid. It's all about love when I say that. But actually, the way we look at resilience and building authenticity with love is really a formula of suggestion, of self-forgiveness, forgiveness of others. We look at how do we create community around ourselves, because that connection is something that we as humans thrive on and that we need. But also it's about the communication and the words we use and the power of those words when we start with love, and how we communicate with each other and with ourselves. A little bit of self-compassion that is part of that. But also humor. If we take ourselves way too seriously, and I like to laugh. I can't believe I wrote a book, but I wrote a book, and that's humorous to me in some ways, but it's part of my purpose to make sure that I share as much of the magic of the real model and enabling myself to live in my purpose, to help others find their authentic selves, but also to build the tools of resilience so that they can live a great life. Because people often say to me, Nathan, how in the heck did you do all the things that you've done? I've worked in professional sports, fast fashion, retail, toy making, and now I work in beauty. They're like, how did you do that? Part of it is, I find myself to be really true and authentic to who I am, and strongly enable that to guide me where I go. But the challenges that I've lived through, whether that was 9/11 or the tsunami, earthquake, nuclear disaster in Japan, I'm kind of known as being a disaster person, which is strange, but I see those as resilience advertunities, which is another word to talk about. The advertunity is where you have an adversity that meets an opportunity, and it's inside that if you change the way you're thinking, you're going to be more resilient. And for me, those have been really big payoffs. So the formula really is about getting real, and when you're real with yourself and with others, you're going to be able to find the strength and power to take you to and through the next thing. And really the unlock is then turning your authentic resilience into your magic power. And the book, it shares a lot of my own personal stories with that, but also those of some of my clients and the people that I've coached, and have, we've built a really great wealth of knowledge and tools for people to find their authenticity, but also to use that as they, build a life of resilience and well-being.
That sounds wonderful. Like, congratulations on being on creating. It feels like it's been a long journey in terms of doing the research through all the chapters in your life, and now you've pulled it together into a book and sharing and helping others to find their real self. I love that. So for someone listening to this who may feel confused or not necessarily living their real self, it can feel quite a big journey ahead. What's a starting point? Like, someone could read your book, and could they do that work themselves, or do you recommend that people work with a coach? Because there's a lot of pain. I know myself, as you transform aspects of your life, particularly the way you see yourself and the way you see other people, everything starts to shift, because as you become your real self, you may realize that your community is not supportive, or your work is not the right environment, or the person you're sharing your life with is not aligned in values. So, and that's why often perhaps we don't want to go there, because it's because we have to change. I'd love your view on how people can shift, because often there is a burning platform that comes along and that triggers a change, and I think we're all very aware of that over the last couple of years. But what would your guidance be in terms of how someone can start to move towards that real self, so that they can live, a real life, or an integrated life, or a life that is very much supported with a foundation of well-being?
Fantastic question, Lawrence. I think, I'll first always start with, there's some things that happen and occur in people's lives that live in the somatic part of our bodies and live deeply, as trauma, or as the neural pathways have been laid in the brain, that just are going to require, professional help of doctors and counselors and therapists. And I always say, when I talk about love and building a community, that network of doctors, caregivers, counselors, therapists, and I'm a big supporter of talking openly about therapy and being in therapy with others. We should destigmatize, therapy, because, we go to the doctor when we break our arm. Everyone can see we went to the doctor, and we say, oh yeah, I went to the doctor. Well, we should also, be able to start the conversations, about our mental health, with ensuring that the community that we build around us, always has a good network of those professionals. That's always kind of the first place that I always start. Of course, I'm hoping that, in the work that I do as a coach, people can find me. I'm here to help drive resilience and change as people evaluate their lives and look at meaning in their lives. But I also think that, and that's what the book is about, and the book is a tool for people to tap into and continue to take that journey. But I think, you're not wrong that, things happen in our lives that cause us to shift our priorities or shift our ways of thinking. But I think when we always start with self, and we start with that internal core, so much of our answers are actually within us. And I think that when we start there, depending, and this is what the book, there's a specific chapter dedicated to how to use the book and how to do some self-coaching. But I think, when we start with ourselves and start with that inner core of our core strengths, our core values, so much of that then can reveal the answers. And I think that's the joyful part of being a coach, is going on that journey with people, and exploring those spaces to unlock those answers, that, while on the surface might seem so mysterious and difficult, but actually live, really deeply within each and every single person. And it's about kind of taking off those layers. One of the things that was really, really helpful for me, and I realized this as a leader, one of my leaders gave me some feedback once, to say, man, you are high wired and super passionate, and that's actually blowing up in your face when you come to the boardroom. Perhaps you need to work on, how you package things. And I had a really good, hard listen and look at that with a coach that I hired for myself. I thought, well, wait a minute, I'm showing up poorly, or I'm facing this adversity because I thought I was really amazing at what I was doing, and yet people are not interacting with me in the ways that I wanted to, or I'm being misperceived. Common. This happens with lots of people, and there's some really great examples in the book. But in my example, I went to my coach and I presented this feedback and said, "What's wrong with me? What do I do?" And he was really smart, and I've taken this language. It's really about just what we call dismantling the radar. So much of the adversities that we sense in our lives, and the stressors and the obstacles, depending on our experiences in our lives as we grow and take on those experiences, are thrown into this radar system. And depending on how heightened or sensitive you are about certain things, this radar system can live in a really strong way. And what I had to do was dismantle my radar system a little and take it down a couple notches and enable messaging to get into me, so that I could then twist and turn how I would think about things, how I would respond to things, and then how I would, ultimately get over the adversity, which was a challenge in the boardroom, for example. But I think people, to your point, they have so many different things that happen in their lives. Adversity is all around us. It's the spilled glass of water, it's missing the bus, and it's these things that happen. And a big part of my practice is to help people reframe and to look at that in a different way, and to let go of the negative experiences. Because Rick Hansen is a great psychologist, American psychologist, wrote a book called Resilient. He talks about the fact that negativity bias is this horrible thing that kind of sticks with us, right? It's like Velcro. Negative experiences just stick on us, and we remember the spilt water, we missing the bus and being late for work. But we forget, that the Danish that we had, or the croissant and the cup of coffee that once we settled in at work, how amazingly delicious and calming that was, and how we forget that part. How was your day? Well, I missed the bus. We need to also help people, and this is a big part of my practice, help people reframe those things, see them differently, that as they go up the reality curve and start to take back the control of that adversity or stressor, that they actually have the answers inside based on who they are, and then they have the control and power to do that. It's all about choice. And I think a lot of times we forget that we have a lot of choice in our lives too.
I think that's a really, really good point. I think we do forget we have choice, and we do. There are consequences to our choices, but we do have choice. And I think when you remember that, that's incredibly empowering, because I think many people in the conversations I have with a lot of people from across the world, there's this feeling of unlearning things that we've learnt, because growing up in our culture, of course, there are things we learn and they become real to us, but of course they may not be real. And I really, relate and like what you said about this, the way we tend to focus on the negative and almost completely ignore any positive thing that occurs in the day, which kind of completely clouds your entire enjoyment of that particular day. That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that. I'm curious that, because when I look at your life, like when I step back and all the things that you've done in terms of building businesses and dealing with people and becoming famous for that role, because when you're growing businesses, as I know myself, the people are often the biggest challenge, because you're dealing with change. So changing ourselves, and we've been talking a lot about that, but when you're dealing with an entire organization of people and you're just trying to get people to change where they're working or different habits, that can be met with a lot of resistance. I'm curious when well-being became a passion for you. So like, when was the moment that you took well-being and everything that we've been talking about and started to integrate it into your work as a people director, so that ultimately you are, you're dealing with self, but you're dealing with others, and a successful business transformation, you can look at that financially, but you can look at it from a people point of view. And if people are unhappy and miserable, even though the numbers are there, that is not necessarily a sustainable success. But if you've got people who are feeling that they are their real selves, that is going to create, sustainable results for that business. So I'm curious when the moment was for you, if there was a moment, it may have just been a journey that you thought, yeah, well-being is the thing that I need to connect with and integrate into my life's work.
Wow. As I think about that answer, I think well-being has always been in the background. It's always been something that's been there. And I went to a university that was built on a Jesuit Catholic belief system, and that, which in Latin is cura personalis, and means care for the whole person. This has been part of my ethos since I was probably about 18 years old. It's always been in my background somewhere. And as an HR person, we always think about people's well-being. And as I've been practicing HR for more than 20 years now, it's always there. But the deeper answer that gets to my heart is probably 2019, probably the worst year of my life, because I didn't realize that I needed well-being. 2019, I was living in Hong Kong. We had the protests going on. I had some struggles at work. I had 4 very important people in my life pass away. My dog nearly died. I had kidney problems. I was in the hospital in 2019. And what I realized was that my well-being batteries were all drained. And it's a story I share in the book, but it's such a powerful story because in the moments of recognizing that all my energy, physical energy, emotional energy, my mental energy, my spiritual energy, my purpose energy, right? All of those were on red zone, alert. Your battery is, you're going to turn off. And what I didn't realize, and this is what's interesting about burnout, is people who are burning out often are the last people to recognize that they're burning out. And interestingly, I thought, one of the things that I was going to do to try to solve that was to host a mental health seminar. And I kind of did it for myself. And this was in 2019. And the thing was, I think 5 people showed up, or maybe 7 people showed up. But 7 people showed up. And it was in that realization of doing this work kind of for myself in a selfish way that I actually realized I was not the only one, and that actually there was meaning in that. And shortly after I ultimately left that company at the end of 2019, and that's when I moved to Singapore. And, there's really great companies all over the world that can also offer a reset button sometimes to people, but also can be really healing. And as I moved here, started the new job, with 2020 COVID kind of crisis evolving, there became a really quick need. And I raised my hand because I knew I had some small success in doing some programming around mental health. And I knew that I was passionate about well-being and also mental health and open therapy, and nurturing and LGBTQ mental health. These are causes that are really important to me personally. I raised my hand and I said, I want to do this. I'm going to do this, and let's drive it. And luckily, or fortuitously, however you want to look at it, COVID continued to go in this strange direction where suddenly we could be in a lot of well-being conversations about a lot of different well-being topics. And then I realized, oh my gosh, this is the other thing. This is where I'm at. I'm an activist in this space because I'm advocating and bringing these conversations to the table. And I'm so excited to blow up things that we don't even talk about in Asia. We don't talk about mental health in Asia Pacific, maybe in the Pacific part, but definitely not in the Asia part. It's a taboo. And we don't often talk about LGBTQ issues in the workplace in Asia, for sure. And I said, well, let's start talking about this. And, we blew up 2 taboos because we don't talk about mental health or gay people at all. And,
Wow.
when we start talking about intersectionality of adversities, oh my gosh, and the COVID lays on top of that, I found my calling, and I've been working in authenticity and resilience as a coach for a while, but then I didn't see it so loud and clear until it was kind of thrust open in this way. And it was during COVID, I said, I'm going to write the book now because I'm really clear. These things are all connecting my energies, and the powers of the universe are leading me to say my life's experiences, my corporate experiences, my passions as an activist, as a feminist, as an LGBTQ fighter, these things are all converging, and my coaching practice ties these things together. How do I get it to work for people? And then it became, and my best friend said to me, this is where the book title comes from, he's like, oh, come on, Nathan, you've been telling me to get real all these years, like, you get real. And I was like, that's the title of the book.
That's the title. Wow.
That's the title of the book, is Your Real Life. And when me, myself and I started to put those things together, I'm like, well, REAL, those are the components to live a great life. Those are the components for building authenticity. And absolutely, those are the tools that you need to learn resilience. We all have the capability to learn both authenticity and resilience. It just takes practice. And it's about choices. It's about boundaries. It's a lot about self-love and self-care in those practices. But we all have that capability. And that's kind of how it was born. And now I'm kind of, you're not going to stop me. Because this is my life's mission, is to really continue this work. And every time I get to talk about it, I'm in my purpose, which is bringing authenticity and resilience to others. However I get a chance to do that. So thank you, Lawrence. You're enabling me to live in my purpose today by being in this conversation.
Which is wonderful. It's so fascinating for me to kind of hear. It's like, again, what you've said, like 2019 was like a perfect storm. So many things were going wrong. Whereas if you roll forward now to 2022, and that's often the case, is when we're in that perfect storm, we don't actually realize that it is one of those, that what you talked about before, an advert opportunity. I think I probably said that wrong, but it's a really good example of that. It's like, so many things are going wrong, and you can easily, but you have a choice, and you have a choice to either feel sorry for yourself or to do something about it. And it's really an amazing journey that you've been on over the last few years, from that point to being about to publish your book, to really help others. A couple of last questions, because I'm conscious of time. I know you and I probably could talk for hours.
I'm losing my computer battery, but yeah.
Two last questions. So the first question, very specific to Body Shop, because I know you talked about rejuvenating the purpose, but I'd love to know what you're doing to support the well-being specifically. What tools for the people that work for the Body Shop across the Asia Pacific region. So that's kind of the first question. I'll ask the second question at the same time. So because this podcast is called the Finding Equilibrium Show, and it's all about finding balance, helping people to find their equilibrium, I'd love to know, first of all, what that means to you. What does finding equilibrium mean to you? There's no right or wrong answer. And also what you do personally to help you, find your equilibrium, because you're doing so many things. And I'm curious on your routines and habits on a daily basis. So probably 3 questions there.
I love it. This is maybe my favorite question. What we're doing at the Body Shop is really, we were so lucky to have Anita Roddick as our founder, because she was already so progressive in that space of thinking about mind, body, and soul. But we've rejuvenated our practices. So our 3 practices at the Body Shop really are built around mind, body, and soul. So mindfulness, connection, and gratitude. We've been practicing these for the last 2.5 years. putting them in all of the various places that we can. So how we start our meetings, how we end our meetings, what we talk about, what we do. I do a lot of walking meetings with my people where we go outside and we walk and talk rather than sit in a room so we can connect and connect with our bodies. But we've been invigorating our culture in this way to establish practices where we are talking about these three things regularly. We developed a lotus of well-being, which are the 7 dimensions of well-being. And in that lotus is things like environmental, social, emotional, mental, physical, financial well-being. And we program through that, but we also use that lotus as a lens of listening so that we understand, what our people are talking about when they're talking about their well-being, and also then how to reach others. The Body Shop is an activist brand. We are change makers, really pushing for systemic change, and that's what we've been known for a long time. We'll continue to be known for that. And the way I like to position that is that most of the time, the thing that we're fighting for is well-being of others, whether that's through the well-being of animals, through animal rights protection and protection of their animal rights, to right now we're campaigning for youth and championing the well-being of youth as we got to enable youth voices. 62% of our world population is led by people 62 years old. But and I might have screwed up the numbers here, but I think I did screw up the numbers. 62 years old or older is the population of leaders, but 60% of our world population is people who are under the age of 30. So we need to do more fighting in this space. So we're constantly fighting for the well-being of other people. And so before you can be that, before you can be a change maker, before you can be an activist, you've got to make sure you are taking care of yourself. Which leads me to the second question about balance and how do I do it? I think what equilibrium and balance means to me is that the things that I choose are very intentional and I'm very conscious about the choices that I make from the time I wake up in the morning and what I do with my morning routine. I block time very specific to me to make sure that I'm taking care of myself so that I can be a great leader. I can be a well-being activist. I can do all of the things that I do. And if I don't fill up and charge my battery first, all my batteries, then it's really difficult for me to be successful in the day. And so for me, it's about the balance of my energies and my practices. To the last question, really, every morning I get up, I do a small meditation. I also journal for probably 20 minutes. I have an old school diary and dear diary, I record very specific things though. My practice is really about writing down gratitudes for the day before and forgiveness of the day before. I actively forgive myself for the things that and my shortcomings for the day before, so that I can start the day with a really clear head. I always have a good cup of coffee, and I take my dogs every morning for a mandatory non-negotiable walk. That's actually for me. Although they physically and emotionally need that walk as well, that I do for myself. And then I start to kind of get into the day. I don't look at my emails. I don't look at any of that stuff because I try to shut that stuff out and really keep boundaries. And I think boundaries are the unsung heroes here of creating a life that is in balance. And I think a lot of times people forget to create those boundaries for themselves, and that's where people get in trouble. But that is, I think, did I answer all three?
You did. That was wonderful. Honestly, thank you so much, Nathan. We are out of time, but let me close by just acknowledging you for all the work that you've done to really champion well-being and help people to live their real life. I can't wait to read the book. I'm very excited. I'm hoping that you'll be back in Melbourne for our Wellbeing at Work Summit in November 2022. So that will be wonderful. But thank you so much for spending some time. I know how super busy you are, but I really appreciate you spending some time and for sharing such wonderful stories, tools, insights, and approaches to help people be more resilient and be more real. I mean, what more? What's more important than that. So thank you so much, Nathan. Where can people find out more about you and about your work? And I know the book's not yet published, but by the time people listen to this, it may well be. So where can people access?
I hope we're going to build a website for the book eventually, probably this summer. But you can find me on LinkedIn under Nathan Andres. And I do connect with lots of people and love to interact with people there. And thank you, Lawrence. Like I said, I get to be in my purpose by talking about this work and hopefully inspiring people to think again about the choices that they make and to think about how they get control back and build resilience and learn from the adversities in their life. That's joyful for me to be here, and I absolutely will do my best to make it back to Melbourne and hopefully see you all in person. So thank you again for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for listening and for your attention, and have a great day, and we'll see you next time.